You are now live, Counselor.
Terrific. At 5:01, we will call the February 28th meeting of the Finance Committee to order, and if we could get a roll call, please.
Certainly. Counselor Villarreal.
Present.
Counselor Cassett.
Here.
Counselor Lindell.
Here.
Counselor Rivera.
Here.
And Counselor O'Mara-Worth.
I am here.
We have a quorum.
Terrific. We do have changes to the agenda. Staff, Mary, do you want to call those out, or do you want me to?
Yes, I can go ahead and fill in if I leave any out. We're going to be postponing items B, C, D, E, F, and J.
Great. Are there any other changes to the agenda from the staff or from committee? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
We could get a roll call on the motion by Counselor Lindell and the second by Counselor Cassett to approve the agenda.
Okay, that'll be Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Counselor Cassett.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell.
Yes.
Counselor Rivera.
Yes.
And Counselor O'Mara-Worth.
Yes. That motion passes. We are now on to the consent agenda. Are there items the committee would like to discuss this evening? Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal, I see your hand waving at me.
Madam Chair, go ahead and go with
Okay, Counselor
Lindell,
Lindell.
because I need to figure out.
Okay, Counselor Lindell, which items would you like to pull? You might be on
Counselor,
mute.
I believe you are on mute.
Yes.
Pardon me, sorry. N as in Nancy, R, and AB.
AB, all right. Other items from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. N is in Nancy, Q. Hold on, let me make sure.
No
Q.
worries.
We did get R, correct?
Counselor Lindell pulled it, yes.
So, okay, and Q is my addition. I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Cassett.
Thank you. I just have one quick question on A.
Okay. Anything else? All right, Counselor Lindell.
Would you just review the items pulled?
Sure.
Counselor O'Mara-Worth?
Sure, so I have N, R, A, B, Q, and A. Obviously not in alphabetical order.
Item M as
M.
in Mary.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Are we ready for a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Lindell, a second from Counselor Cassett to approve the consent agenda as amended. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Counselor Cassett.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell.
Yes.
Counselor Rivera.
Yes.
And Counselor O'Mara-Worth.
Yes. All right, our consent agenda is approved, and we are now on to approval of the minutes for the Finance Committee February 14th meeting. Are there changes from staff or the committee? And if not, is there a motion?
No changes from staff, Madam Chair.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve the February 14th minutes of the Finance Committee by Counselor Lindell, a second by Counselor Cassett. Can we get a roll call, please, on the approval of the minutes?
Counselor Vieira,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Lindell,
yes,
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
and Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, we have approval of the minutes, and then we will move on to our first presentation of the night. We have Director McCoy with us to talk about the FY21 audit status update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Counselors, today with us, we have our accounting officer, Ricky Bejarano, as well as our our audit coordinator, Stephanie Woodruff. They're joining us as well. I'll go ahead and start moving through the agenda. The update that we have for you today, as far as the overall timeline, remains the same. We are still on target to produce the CFA to submit to our external auditor on March 16th, so a few weeks away, and to produce the final trial balance for the auditors by the end of March. As we've reviewed in prior weekly updates, we have made significant progress on a few areas, including fund balance and net position. This is considered 100% complete. We've also made significant progress on inter funds. This is also considered 100% complete. As we reported last week, we have made significant progress on capital assets, and Ricky is joining us today to give us some insight to exactly what this 100% complete means. Ricky, do you want to share some of the details about the number of transactions as well as the dollar values that have been reviewed for fiscal year 21? Mr. Bejarano, I think you're either muted or we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. We can't hear you.
You there?
Yes, can hear you now, but
Lightly.
faintly.
Yeah, faintly. No. Do you have a headphone set or something you could?
No.
Still can't hear you. No.
Now?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you, Ricky.
My
The
apologies.
The eagle has landed.
If I may, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for your indulgence. Essentially, in order to audit or pre-audit our capital assets, 303,652 transactions were mined by our consultants. This is approximately $51 million worth of transactions. Not all of them were necessarily capital assets, but they have to be mined through the system to ensure that could potentially be capital assets. So it's quite a heavy lift. Within our capital assets also, I might add, are 139 capital projects that are in process. Those amount to approximately 42 million. One of the things I want to point out is that the process to pre-audit these is the same. We're using the same process as if we're actually undergoing audit, which means the contractors have been asked to review the transactions as if we were in an audit already. The audit, of course, comes up after our drop dead date of 3/31/22. It's a iterative process. We did find some errors in some of the work of the contractors. Our primary contractors review the work. There's a number of, it's very common for there to be a number of reviews of the work papers and the samples that they've drawn. REDW is our main contractor, and there were some errors found, which is quite common. It's part of the process. So while we consider ourselves 100% complete, we have sent some items back to the contractors for revision, and that's going on now. This is not going to interrupt the 3/31/22 date. That's still our target, and it's an achievable target in our opinion. And as far as corrections and whatnot, I've been in this business for 43 years. Personally, I've never submitted work papers that didn't have review notes when they came back. They're never perfect. It's a little bump in the road, but we will overcome that and we'll stay on track and be ready to submit by 3/31/22.
Thank you, Ricky, for explaining that process. It's very helpful. We're going to move on from capital assets. I think as Mr. Bejarano shared with us, this was a significant lift in the stats that he cited, and quite significant progress that's been made to date on this area. Moving forward, we have also made significant progress, particularly in the last week in our deferred inflows and outflows as they pertain to net pension and our OPEB liability, that is other post-employment benefits like retiree healthcare. So what's up on deck to get us the remainder of the 10% home is to do the final review this week. And as Mr. Bejarano outlined, there is that review process. There are notes that are given on the work papers, and then potentially something will pop up that needs to be addressed with more detailed work or some additional research. So that's what's remaining for this particular area. Moving on to the CFA, we are still on track. We are about 64% complete with the CFA. This touches all expenditures of federal awards across the city, including for this particular fiscal year, the CARES Act expenses. For our progress on liabilities, we moved from 47 to 55% complete. Our target date for this was moved from the end of last week to this coming week, and then by next Wednesday for the final review. What is up again this week is quality control review of what has been completed. As Mr. Bejarano mentioned, we still have a significant ways to go with that quality review process to be able to finalize the liabilities for fiscal year 21. Yes, Mr. Bejarano?
Yes, I just think it's important to point out that within this process, a lot of times, even if there aren't errors found in the review, it may generate questions. For example, as the expert reviewer is reviewing the work papers, it may stir up 10 more questions that have to be investigated. And that's so that by the time it gets to the actual auditors, every stone's been unturned as to our knowledge, and so that we can move forward. So this is, again, it might see, this isn't what I would consider a bump in the road. It's just, we're trying to do more investigation to make sure we get it right the first time. When we turn it into our auditors, the actual auditors who are CLA, the hope is, and the probability is that everything will have been reviewed to such extent that it cuts down their work and the time that they have to spend auditing.
Thank you. Moving on to assets, we have increased the progress on this from 62 to 65%. This is the biggest change in our timeline. As Mr. Bejarano just mentioned, with progress over liabilities, that also applies to progress over assets. Here we are taking extra time. The original date on this was today, was February 28th, and we've determined that we need an additional 3 weeks to be able to slow down and continue a more detailed, thorough review over all of our assets. Assets does include major areas like cash reconciliation for our 7 major pooled cash accounts, 2 of which are listed here. So as we are moving through this process over the next few weeks, we'll be completing the reconciliations. There will be notes given about the reconciliations, what needs to be tightened up, what needs to be refined. And then those notes will be taken into consideration. Those changes will be made, and then we'll continue to make progress week after week as this 65% number will be bumped up to 100% by March 21st. With that, I think that's the last slide that we have, but just did want to say with these updates to the timeline, we are still on target for March 16th to produce the CFA and March 31st to produce the city's final trial balance for our auditors. With that, Madam Chair, we'll stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee? Okay, Director McCoy, if we could move on to the December 2021 gross receipts tax update, that'd be great.
Yes, my pleasure. We have joining us today our Planning and Investment Officer, Bradley Flitch. Bradley will be sharing his screen. I just wanted to say a few words about the information that he will be reviewing. Very similar to what we have become accustomed to reporting. This is the monthly GRT update that covers year to year, period to period comparisons for our gross receipts tax, both our distributions as well as the taxable gross receipts for the city of Santa Fe, which is a good measure of how our economy is performing. That being said, we have also included a slide ahead of the budget adjustments that are on the agenda tonight, and we'll be moving through the committee process of where we stand for the fiscal year, for fiscal year 22 from July 2021 through December of 2021. So Brad will be sharing that information. If you can keep that in mind as these budget adjustments are moving forward, we really are at a really great inflection point, having half of the year reported and distributed by the Taxation and Revenue Department. We wanted to share this good news with the committee tonight and the governing body as we move forward, to let them know that we do have additional funds, additional gross receipts tax and additional lodgers tax available above the conservative levels that we budgeted for in the current year. With that good news, we are bringing forward a series of multiple budget adjustments, a little shy of a dozen budget adjustments for your review. These are areas where we wanted to be able to get a head start on the construction season, be able to order, for example, police vehicles at this time. So because we know the lag time that we are currently facing in ordering any kind of vehicles. So also important to be able to address the eviction moratorium that's being lifted, other priority areas that we didn't want to wait until the new fiscal year to be able to fund. With that, we hope that our team working together will be able to get not only this funding budgeted with your approval, but also be able to move forward into procuring this very quickly and a quick turnaround. We look forward at the future, at the next Finance Committee meeting, and to be able to bring forward a package for the ARPA funding as well. So keep in mind, we have different buckets of money that we are using to address all of the city's many priorities. So this is additional gross receipts tax and lodgers tax. We will in the future be discussing the federal ARPA funding. And then in April, we will pivot to discussing our FY23 budget. And then shortly after that, we'll begin discussing the opportunities that we're going to have for a gross receipts tax backed bond in the current calendar year. So just a little preview of what's ahead in the actions that we're going to be bringing forward through our spring sessions with you all in the Finance Committee. So with that, Brad, if you can go ahead and proceed with your update.
Thank you, Mary. Good evening, councilors, chair. We are, as we usually go through our gross receipts tax, there is a 2-month delay. So this is the activity that occurred in December. And as Mary said, it is 6 months worth of collections. Primary source of revenue for the city, retail trade, the single largest contributor to GRT, accommodation, food service, construction, and other services. This month coincided at 11% of each. They contribute 11% each to the total GRT, and finally made up with professional, scientific, and technical services. And those five together make up 70% of the total GRT for the city. So as we can see for the, this is, yeah. And I think I went maybe 1 2 minutes. Yep, there we go. So total taxable gross receipts, the Santa Fe business community received was 434 million. And as you can see, it just really blows away prior years. A lot of this, you know, is just, and again, a third of that is retail trade. So, I mean, it's the biggest thing that has happened in the last year is on July 1st, the city or the state began tracking internet sales and remitting those proceeds to the city. And that's the single biggest thing that's happened to gross receipts. And as you can see, with a very large business community having a really good December, the city also had the largest single month distribution ever at 13.7 million. There was a prior, I think July 2 years ago, we had 13.7 million, but that included a 3.7 million settlement. So this is straight gross receipts. And again, a lot of that it's being driven by retail sales. So in this case here, we're comparing total how much we had received in the first 6 months. And as you can see, FY23, we're substantially ahead of FY22. And even, you know, FY21 was the prior high water mark for the first 6 months. And, you know, that's nearly $8 million better. We've actually received 67% of the budget already. Typically by December, the 5-year average is 52% of the budget is received as of December. And we're already at 67% of budget. Accommodation and food service, this is the tourism industry, had a really good December at 48.1 million. It beat December 2020 by 28 million. And it actually exceeded December 2019 by 7.5 million. Professional, scientific, and technical services, this is a real shooting star right now. One, you know, it's a big amount, 48 million in taxable gross receipts. It grew 35.1% over December 20 and 80% better than December 19. This is one of those industry sectors that grew through the pandemic. I almost forgot what it was. And but it keeps growing. And this is really kind of a shooting star. You want to point this out. This is where, you know, economic development is really putting a lot of their efforts, you know, in trying to grow, you know, Santa Fe's economy. And can't really draw a direct correlation to it, but when you start looking at the folks that economic development is working with, this is probably where they're going to end up when they do generate taxable gross receipts. Information industry grew 109%. This is where the film industry resides. And we've seen that information industry, it was 22 million. It grew 45% over 2019. And it's 106% over 2020. And then lastly is the construction industry, grew taxable gross receipts by 20% over 2020 and 32% over December 19. And construction taxable gross receipts totaled 47.5 million. And that's my presentation. I stand for any questions.
Brad, if you could stop sharing your screen, that'd be great. Or whoever
Yes,
is
I can
sharing.
do that right now.
Perfect, then I can see everyone. Questions from the committee on this presentation? Don't see anybody waving at me, so thank you, Brad and Director McCoy. It's seemingly good news, but I worry, how's your crystal ball? Do we know where we're gonna level off, or when we're gonna, I don't know, get to a, yeah.
Well, Madam Chair, we actually discussed that somewhat this weekend. As you know, the events in Europe and the Soviet or Russia, that will play out. It's playing out in the global schemes right now in the bond market, the stock market, global currencies. Russia is a major exporter of raw materials. We may not see the delays hit the supply chain immediately, but you know, they are the largest producer of iron ore, copper, palladium. The list is actually extensive of which they produce. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. It's the single largest exporter of wheat. This is going to do nothing to abate the inflation issues. How people feel and travel and other issues. That is right now kind of what we're wondering. How is that going to impact lodger's tax? How will it impact GRT? What else would it impact the city? And so we're looking into our crystal ball. We don't have any answers.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I mean, I think all of the, you know, we're not isolated from events, the international and geopolitical events that are happening. So it'll be interesting to see, and I guess we'll have to have some time to see what we need to do to be prepared for any impact that comes our way. Councilwoman Villarreal, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question related to how GRT is affected by inflation, which you indicated it is. So if there's high inflation, what do we need to do? I guess that at certain times that actually leads to recessions. So are we planning accordingly for, you know, this historical high? Plus, there was a lot of money infused by the federal government. So at what point, when that tapers off, then we have to prepare for other economic circumstances or scenarios?
Madam Chair, Councilor, thank you for that question. I think part of what the city has done very robustly over the past few years is build up our rainy day fund, build up the undesignated reserve levels to be able to weather initially the crisis. If you recall, going back to fiscal year 21, we did use, and for the current fiscal year as well, the conversations we were having last spring about the use of reserve levels in our recurring budget. So that is something that we have been able to do to build up that rainy day fund, and we've been the beneficiary of that through these uncertain times. I think we will continue that stance to ensure that we have significant reserve levels to be able to cover operations. The state mandate is 1/12 of general fund operations. And I know our utilities fund have different levels of reserve requirements as well. So that's one way that that our government can prepare for any type of uncertain time, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a geopolitical instability and the aftermath that may ensue.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So are you saying that the reserves that we did utilize, those will be replenished, or we have already replenished them?
Madam Chair, Counselor, yes, our policy is to always keep at least the 112, which is required by DFA. The city ordinance actually go one step above that and require 10% reserve for the general fund. So we have that, plus we have an amount in addition to that to remain in reserves in anticipation for any type of revenue fluctuations to be able to manage through. Also, I think as has been cited by both S&P and Fitch in the ratings, most recent ratings that were issued in the fall, the city does have, because we meet every 2 weeks, just like the package before you tonight of budget adjustments, we do have the ability, unlike perhaps the state legislature that has to call a special session into session, we do have the ability to both expand expenditures as well as contract expenditures to be able to react very timely to any type of situations. If you recall, it was about 2 years ago at this time that Brad, in our quarterly report, presented some anomalies in the stock market that were driven by the onset of the pandemic. And that was one of our initial signs that we had to start thinking about the last quarter of fiscal year 20 a bit differently. And so again, we continue to provide the information, whether it's on gross receipts tax or information that Brad and his team, if you recall Dr. White presenting to the committee, they track everything from inflation to unemployment to our labor market. To be able to keep us more on top of those month-to-month fluctuations. Shall any changes occur, we would then present to the Finance Committee like we did 2 years ago.
Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, Counselor Cassett.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you, everybody, for the presentation. Just one quick question. I know that one was a one-time settlement. We had a one-time settlement amount coming in. Brad, can you remind me what that was? I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind and I did not write it down.
That was 2 years ago. It was for 3.7, or through the chair, Madam Chair. It was Counselor, it was 3.7 million. It was retailers were not properly collecting and reporting their taxes. And this year we did get a $2.7 million settlement. That was a legal settlement brought by a lawsuit. I believe Albuquerque sued DFA. And as a beneficiary in September, the city received I think it was 2.7 million, 2.4 million net.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you going over those numbers again. That was all.
Other questions? All right, thank you. We'll look forward to future predictions and events that we should be paying attention to as things change and shift. All right, we will go on we have a presentation, City of Santa Fe Employee Benefits Presentation by, how do we say that? Aon? And we have Alvin Valdez here. He is the Benefits and Wellness Supervisor, and he has a presentation to give to us tonight. Thanks for being with us, Alvin.
Thank you very much. Do we have Todd or Don on the video?
Looks like we have
You now have Todd.
Salazar. There's Todd.
Hey, Alvin.
All right, Todd. We have Todd Burley from Aon. He's going to give us a presentation for our FY23 benefits that's coming up. Go ahead, Todd.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Everyone can see this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to leave it, and I'll leave it on this mode so I can still see people. We're going to talk about three things here today. First, we'll go over some reporting. It's actually through January of 22. It's been updated. We'll talk about the renewal projection for both health, dental, and all the other benefits. And then there's some benchmarking information that we'll cover last. First, what I want to do is give a little history of what has happened with the health plan over the past 2 fiscal years due to the pandemic and the hardship that it caused the city of Santa Fe's employees. Despite a recommended increase of 9% in fiscal year 21 and 11% in fiscal year 22, the rates were held steady. There were some minimal benefit changes made in fiscal year 21. You can see those some minor copay increases for office visits and some limits on acupuncture and some other alternative therapies. But otherwise, there have been no changes made either to rates, which equals employee contributions, or again, just some minor changes in benefits 2 years ago. Next, we'll show year to date. This shows that the last 2.5 fiscal years. Column C, fiscal year 20, there was, if you look at row 15, there's about a $400,000 deficit. Fiscal year 21, last year, there was about a $600,000 deficit. So far in the first 7 months of fiscal year 22, there's about a $200,000 deficit comparing what is funded by both the city and the city's employees through their paycheck contributions to the expenses, which are claims and fixed costs. Those fixed costs are the administration fees paid to Cigna, as well as stop loss premiums. Take the $200,000 shortfall so far with a grain of salt, as we'll see on this page. There are 2 months which are highlighted in yellow for which the city receives 3 paycheck contributions from its employees. Both of those have already occurred in this fiscal year, so you can see that funding is about $2.1 million. In the 2 paycheck months, it's about $1.4 million. That's in column D. If you move out to column H, you can see that typically what happens is in those 3 paycheck months, the city runs a surplus of $500,000. And then there are losses for the other 5 months. So we expect losses from basically January through June of basically the remainder of the fiscal year. So although the loss is only $200,000 at this point, we expect that to grow. As is always the case, the losses are driven by your high cost claimants. Just wanted to show that so far in this fiscal year, so this is the first 6 months of the year, there's 3 claimants over $200,000, one of which the city has stop loss at $250,000. So any single claimant who exceeds $250,000 in the fiscal year, Cigna pays the amount above $250,000. The city pays the first $250,000. So you can see there have already been 2 claimants who have exceeded that threshold. So the city has recouped $128,000 from Cigna. Just for comparative purposes, on slide 8, we'll show in the past 2 fiscal years, again, there have been 14 and 15 claimants totaling $3 and $4 million. And you can see on the far right, the stop loss recoveries of $440,000 last fiscal year and $1.1 million in the prior. So where does that leave the city for the projected fiscal year 23 cost? We're tentatively recommending an 18.5% increase to medical and RX funding. This is based on claims paid through December. As mentioned earlier, due to the hardship that COVID caused, not only a healthcare influence, but a general quality of life influence, the decision was made not to increase premiums and only make those minor benefit changes over the last 2 fiscal years. 18.5% sounds, really extreme, but medical claims costs are increasing at about 6% per year. So with 3 years of no changes to rates. That's essentially just a trend increase over that 3-year period. That 18.5% increase will increase total funding, that's both city and employee share, from about 18 million to a little over 21. The city funds 76.5% of that total funding, so that's an increase of a little over 2.5 million. The employees fund the remainder. Their paycheck contributions would increase by $800,000. These estimates are all based off of the 2021 enrollment in the plan. Some good news, dental is appropriately funded. Nothing needs to be done. The other coverages, vision, life insurance, et cetera, all have rate guarantees through next year. So no changes to those as well. Bernadette, did you want to talk about the last 2 bullet points?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We have met with the Group Insurance Benefits Advisory Committee to review this information, and union leadership will be discussing this information with their membership and provide the city with information and feedback after their discussions for consideration. And so our next scheduled meeting with them is this week on March 2nd to go over the discussions that they had with their membership. And so these are the first planning steps of the renewal process that will happen through the FY23 budget.
Okay, next on slide 11, what we want to show, we'll focus kind of on the bottom right-hand corner of this. What you'll see throughout this are the employee bi-weekly contributions. Up at the top, current fiscal year 2022 range from $87 for employee only to $208 for a family, a little bit more for fire as they have a more generous benefit plan than other employees. Down in the right-hand corner in the far right, what you'll see is, if the 18.5% is the final increase, how that will impact employees' biweekly paychecks. So again, the increase would range from $16 for employee only up to $38 for a family for the non-fire employees, and then $18 to $43 for the fire employees. That's second to last column, the estimated city of Santa Fe biweekly impact. So the city's share is increasing significantly more than the employees, from 52 to 125 or 58 to 139. Next, we wanted to show a kind of a benefit comparison between the City of Santa Fe's premium plans. So the City of Santa Fe offers 3 benefit plans, but over 95% of the employees are enrolled on the premium plan. That's in column A. And that is compared to both the state of New Mexico's Cigna PPO plan, and the benchmark is an AON benchmark for all public entities in the 500 to 5,000 employee range nationwide. You can see in rows 1 and 2, the City of Santa Fe has no deductible as compared to, for employee only, anywhere from $750 to $875 for state of New Mexico or the benchmark. The out-of-pocket maximum, that's the maximum and a member would have to pay out of their own pocket for in a contract year. See, City of Santa Fe is at $2,500. State of New Mexico is $5,000. The benchmark is $4,250. Families are generally 2 or 3 times that amount. PCP copays are also better than the state plan and in line with the benchmark. For the non-fire, for the fire, they're significantly better. Same with ER copays, they're either better or in line. Urgent care is lower than the state, and long story short, all of the City of Santa Fe's benefits are more generous than what they would receive either under the state of New Mexico plan or on a benchmark mid-level national public sector plan. The next up, we wanted to show at that 18.5% increase, how the city of Santa Fe's contributions compare to the state of New Mexico Cigna PPO plan. You can see in column A, the biweekly contributions range from 103 per paycheck up to, for employee only, up to a little less than 250 for family. And if you go out to the far right, you'll see that's still about 10% lower for employee only and about 15 to 20% lower for family than the state of New Mexico plan. The fire contributions are kind of in line with state of New Mexico for employee only and roughly in line with the state for the other three tiers, or a little bit better. But what needs to be kept in mind throughout all this is that keep in mind the city of Santa Fe's benefits are more generous. So in addition to the paycheck contributions being in line or lower than the comparator group, if a city of Santa Fe member moved to the state of New Mexico plan, there would additionally be an expected a little less than $2,000 in out-of-pocket costs, that being the deductible, co-insurance, copays, those higher copays, etc., on the state of New Mexico plan relative to the really generous benefits that the city of Santa Fe offers. Next up, to mitigate some of the 18.5% increase, we're looking at some benefit changes. So if the city of Santa Fe were to implement a $250 deductible, that's in comparison back to those benchmark groups of the state at $750 and the benchmark at between $800 and $900, and then just 10% co-insurance where the benchmarks were 20%. So this deductible and co-insurance would apply to inpatient and outpatient hospital services and lab and x-ray. We would increase the out-of-network deductibles, but again, less than 2% of services are provided out-of-network. No change to other benefits. Implementing these benefit changes would reduce that recommended increase from 18.5% down to 15%. There would be a increase in benefits for behavioral health services. Some of you may be familiar with the state Senate Bill 317, which eliminates cost sharing being any members out-of-pocket costs for behavioral health services. Both medical and pharmaceutical behavioral health services would be covered at 100%. If the city were to implement this for July 1 of 2023, there's no direct cost to the city to increase the benefit for those services. Lastly, and generally, I go through a page of number after number after number. This is just a high level of how I arrived at the 18.5%. Basically, we take net claims. We made adjustments for COVID impacts, both past, present, and future. Historical adjustments were made for benefit changes. Referencing back a few slides, again, trend factors are about 6% annually. And then we trend all that forward, and that's how we arrive at the 18.5% increase. More details on this page, but I'm not going to bore you with the numbers. But that is the end of the presentation, and we'll open it to questions. Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, if you would, we can always go back if we need to, if a counselor wants to look at a particular slide. Thank you for the presentation. Questions, and I'm sorry, I didn't announce at the front end that Director Salazar with Human Resources was with us tonight. Thank you for being here, and sorry for that oversight. Questions from the committee? Do I have questions? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this information takes a while to absorb this, even though you present it in a similar fashion every year. But essentially, with this increase, you give us scenarios about how it will change the biweekly payments. I'm trying to find that slide. Let's see. The 18.5%. So are you saying in order to meet that percentage, there's a breakdown on page, I think 14 of the presentation about the renewal summary. I didn't quite understand that piece that you were explaining to us about how the benefit changes would result in a 15% recommended increase. And then you talked about deductibles being implemented. Is that what you're essentially saying, that with this 18.5% increase, that deductibles on certain services would be included?
No,
Councilwoman, I believe Director Salazar has her hand up. Perhaps we should go there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, and Todd, you can jump in if you would like, but the recommendation for an 18.5% increase would be with the no plan design changes. And so there is a slide in the presentation for a 15% increase, and to get to a 15%, there would have to be some plan design changes. But I just want to make sure this is the purpose of this presentation is just to give an update on where our plan is. And because we're getting close to the budget season, we thought we would include the renewal numbers since we have already started working with the Benefits Advisory Committee meeting. That way everyone is on the same page and everyone knows what we're looking at heading into the budget season. So what we're hoping to do is have these discussions with the advisory committee to be able to bring different options before the governing body for a vote before or during the budget time. So this is just, and any feedback or input that you'd like for us to go back and look at before we present information to the full governing body during the budget process would be very helpful. But again, these discussions are ongoing with the Benefits Advisory Committee, but we just wanted to give the information as we become aware of it to all involved, because I know it's a very, our benefits are very important to all employees and we don't take that lightly. So we want to make sure we're getting as much feedback and input as we possibly can.
Okay, so I guess that's that 15% rate change. I'll have to look at that separately because it's more involved. But essentially for the rate change for the biweekly contribution for the premium plan, it increases, but none of the copays and specialists, all the copays stayed the same.
With the 18.5%, yes.
And I guess I'm just curious about, I've just noticed in some of the other kind of more proactive, what I call proactive health measures, you know, acupuncture, the medical massage, et cetera. And that was adjusted last year significantly. But this year I'm hearing that there's this other third party that's going to be thrown into the mix with Cigna. I don't know if we have control over that, but they'll be doing this other kind of formula of pay. Do you know anything about that?
Who are you directing? Yeah, who are you directing?
I'm not sure who would know this.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I think I think you might be talking about a third party vendor for acupuncture and massage therapy. I can't remember the name, but we can get some more details on that. I think we've had a little bit of discussion as it was approaching probably last fiscal year, but we can get some more information on that.
Yeah, I'd like to know more. I'd like to know more about that because that increases some fees for them, and there's some practitioners that are deciding that maybe they don't want to work with the city under the Cigna plan, which I think would be unfortunate. So I'd like to understand better what that structure means. And then the other question I had is, what is our contract with Cigna again? Like, how long do we have that we've committed to working with them or to being part of their plan?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, our contract with Cigna expires in June of 2023. So as soon as this process and open enrollment is over, we will begin the RFP process, and this will be a big year because all of our services are bundled into this contract essentially. So we will be going out for RFP because that contract expires in a little over a year from now.
Okay, I think that would be good for us to start looking at other providers and see what else is out there. Because I think we have decent plans, a decent plan, and there's pros and cons to it. It just, there's other things I've heard about other plans that seem to work better for other government entities, but I'd like to know more about that later. Remind me that the way it's structured, we run our healthcare program essentially. Remind me the term, I always forget what it's called.
That's self-funded.
Self-funded. So would that be something on the table again to look at? That the city would maybe consider another model instead of a self-funded model? I'm just curious.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, we can certainly explore that. I think if you deviate from a self-funded plan, you lose the autonomy and flexibility to really offer the plans that you like, that have benefits for your employees. And it is oftentimes more expensive. So we can explore that, but it offers, it provides for less flexibility for your employees.
I think, I mean, I don't know the pros and cons of it. And I've been under a plan that's not self-funded in a government structure. So I guess I'm just curious if we could, when the time comes to actually compare so that we can see what that looks like.
Yes,
and what that means for us, not what we put into it to run it, but, you know, we use Aon, and that's another additional expense. And I don't know if everyone else that has a self-funded plan does that. But that's, you know, another layer that I'm curious about. So I probably, oh, sorry, go ahead, Director Salazar.
Yes, so every self-funded plan that I'm aware of, local government has a consultant that helps them with this type of information. But we can do a pros and cons, and I think that would be a good idea. We can definitely do that.
Well, just so we know we're heading down the path that we want to, and just it confirms whether the way we're doing it makes sense or if we've thought of other ways. So I guess I just would think the comparison would be helpful. And I may have more questions and details about this, but some of this I just need to digest a little bit longer. So I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Salazar, who makes up the Benefit Advisory Committee?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, it's essentially the union leadership, primarily the presidents, someone from HR, someone from finance, and anybody else that the city manager deems appropriate. We have been pretty flexible with the unions to allow them a couple people. So that way it is a lot of information to absorb and understand. So they bring either one or two additional members to the meetings.
And how many times have you met, or when was the last meeting?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we did have a meeting last week to discuss this. And then prior to that, I can get the date for you. I know we were meeting monthly after the budget cycle last year for FY22. And I will say that during the fall, it got a little bit challenging to meet every month. And I know on their side, it's hard for them to attend every meeting, but I can get you the date of the last time we met prior to this. But we did have several meetings, and at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then provided like the quarterly cap reports and then the presentations that Todd provides, that Aon provides periodically as well.
And I assume what Todd presented earlier that had language with regards to the unions, is that keeping in line with what's in their current collective bargaining agreement?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, absolutely. So this is essentially the same information that was presented to them the last meeting, but every time we look at any potential changes, we're always making sure that it's in compliance with the CBAs and how they read right now.
Yeah, and then I heard some
Turn on the light over there.
discussion about maybe switching from Cigna, but in reality, this is the city's plan, right? This is our plan, and Cigna is simply the administrator of that plan. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, you're absolutely correct. So the provider that we utilize, we can have a plan and build the plan how we want it. You know, that will happen through the RFP process. Then we find who the carrier will be. So we decide what we want to offer as a plan. And so it's not Cigna who offers that particular plan. I'm sure that different providers or carriers offer different benefits, but essentially we decide what we want our plan to look like, and then we go out for RFP to find who the city would like to use as a provider or a carrier.
So since it's our plan, I mean, really the administrator doesn't really have much say in it, except, I mean, they may have some benefits associated with it, but they don't have much say in the plan itself. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I don't know, Todd, if you have anything you'd like to add based on your experience, but you're correct, Councilor Rivera.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, the city is free to select the benefit plan of their choosing, being self-funded. With Cigna, you're basically paying them to administer your claims, handle customer service, you're quote unquote renting their network, and they also handle stop loss reimbursements for the city as well.
All right, and then I don't know if this is for you, Ms. Salazar, or for Todd, but you know, I know last fiscal year, you know, we basically used reserves to kick the can down the road, for lack of a better term. Is there a way, have we looked at doing some kind of phased in approach, maybe over the next 3 years, so it's not such a hit on both the city and the employees?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we have talked about that in the past, I think, because it's been a few years since we've had any adjustments. It's a little bit difficult because we're essentially trying to play catch up, but certainly we can look at that approach, and maybe that's something that's a little bit easier to absorb as we go through the discussions. And the only, I would say, and Todd, again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, if we came up with a plan and we said for the next 3 years, we're going to have automatic increases of this, but then if we had a really, really bad year again, and the increases should be more than whatever it is that we agreed to, we might have to build in some flexibility with that, just because you know, historically for the last few years, we've seen an uptick in claims and costs. So I would say that's a really good way to look at it. If we can just add some flexible language in the event that we really had a bad year, it might be a little bit more than that. But I like that idea. And I think maybe we can, as we continue with these discussions, look at something like that as well, if you would like us to do that.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Benefits Advisory Committee may have some different ideas, or maybe they may embrace that one a little more than just an 18% increase across the board. But I'm sure they'll have something to say about it as well, and I look forward to your work with them. Thank you, and please include us, if you can include me at least in when those meetings are at. And I don't know if we're allowed to attend, but just so we know that the meetings are happening, that would be great.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Valdez, if you can mute your computer, that'd be terrific. And Councilwoman Cassett.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't have too much else to add, as my colleagues covered a lot of ground there. Thank you both. But Director Salazar, we had some discussions last fiscal year about the timing of our open enrollment, and that we have open enrollment in June as opposed to December, November, December, which the end of the year, the calendar year, more aligns with I think most businesses, as well as the state exchange. And so I was curious about, we had discussed looking at changing our open enrollment period to align more with the calendar year as opposed to the fiscal year. And I was curious what you have found about potentially realigning.
Madam Chair, Councillor Cassett, thank you for that question. We have looked at it. I think different governmental agencies use calendar year, some use fiscal year. I do think from a fiscal perspective, it's easier fiscal year. From an HR perspective and ACA federal reporting, it is easier for a calendar year. And again, as you mentioned, because of the open enrollment, and to me, to get the budget in and allow employees enough time, it would be easier to do it on a calendar year. With that said, it is split. Some people do it fiscally and some do it on a calendar year basis. We can look at that as we approach the RFP process, as the Cigna contract will be expiring soon. So I think this is a good time to look at it. To see if we would migrate to calendar year, but more of that information will come as we approach the contract renewal for our benefits plan. So I appreciate the question, and that is definitely on our radar as we go through this process.
Wonderful, thank you. And I would be curious if the Benefits Advisory Committee does have any input of what employees would prefer in terms of as they're making their decisions about what other plans might be available to them. I will just speak briefly to Councilwoman Villarreal's question about the third party. I do have a smidge of experience with this third party provider, both from knowing a chiropractor who does the work, as well as I had actually previously been employed with them as a health coach. This company, American Specialty Health, actually a vast majority of insurances in the area utilize them to be able to do the payouts for chiropractic, massage, and acupuncture. So getting away from them might be harder. And yes, they do have a vastly different pay structure that typically pays providers less, from what I have seen and from what I have heard in speaking with providers and from helping submit insurance claims. So it will, I think as we're going out to bid again, this will be an interesting conversation to have, and something that we'll need to look out for and really be aware of. I don't know if there's anything that we can necessarily do within our ability as a self-administered plan, but I'm also concerned about it and know that there have been some providers that have dropped off our network because of this change of moving over to using ASH as the reimbursement for alternative medicine. So also very concerned about that, and look forward to future conversations about that. So thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions, mostly just to push this information out. Where are we? So during COVID, we saw everybody stay home, not take care of a variety of health needs. We've seen an uptick. Have we leveled off there? Or do we anticipate more doctor's visits, more claims being made now?
Madam Chair, councilors, we have not seen an uptick. Claims in calendar year 2021 were within a couple of percent of pre-pandemic levels. There still is concern, of course, that there will be increased severity of conditions and an uptick in some of the voluntary surgeries, let's say the knee, hip replacements, et cetera. But we have not seen that yet. We actually have an update from Aon's actuaries later this week, so I can provide more updated information at the next time we meet.
Great, and that's a good segue too for just, I have spoken with Director Salazar about doing these presentations a little bit more frequently instead of just once a year, just so we can not have so much information presented all at once, and that we kind of remember from the last time, okay, this is, we talked about this, and then you can kind of add information on top of it. And I think it'll help us be very, very much more fluent than these once a year presentations. So we will try our best to do a little bit more. And I think that will be helpful. So just to sum up, we are, so in the last 2 years, and then including this year, we should have been raising premiums by about how much? If we, due to COVID, we said, no, we're not going to do that. So the last 2 years, we should have done it. And this year, what should that number have been?
So, Madam Chair, councilors, the recommended increase 2 years ago was 9%. Last year is 12%. Again, medical trends are in the 5 to 6% range. So barring benefit changes or any other downward pressure on costs, for example, COVID in Q2 calendar of 2020, basically the average increase both locally and nationally is in the 5 to 6% range.
So, and that's, again, just to go back, just to review, the reason why we're seeing this 18% number is because we have not increased each of the last 2 years, and then this year needing to increase again. So that's why we've gotten to this, what feels like a really big number.
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay. And we do have 2 proposals in front of us. One is to raise by 18% and not make any benefits changes. One is to raise by 15% and make some benefit changes. And then we also may hear some other ideas from the Benefits Advisory Committee, which is meeting this week with management to discuss their ideas. And, I think to Councilor Rivera's point, we may be able to think about how we use our reserves to soften some of this. But again, the volatility makes that something that we'll really have to work with to address. Am I getting that right? Both Director Salazar and Mr. Burley?
Madam Chair, yes, and I apologize for my darkness of the screen. I don't know what's going on with my lights. I'm either purple or another color, so I apologize. But yes, so our goal was to first present all the information to the Benefits Advisory Committee, the same information that you have before you tonight, so that way they have some time to absorb it, talk with their membership, and then come back as a group and talk about some of the ideas that we may have. As I mentioned to them during our meeting, this is our plan. It affects all city employees the same. And so we want to hear from them and what their members have to say on how we can kind of close this gap. So I really like the idea that Councilor Rivera put forth, and this is something that we can definitely talk about this week. And then we would come back to you with some other ideas and different options before you all have to make a decision on the funding level for the budget process. So that way you know that it's been discussed with the committee, they've had the opportunity to talk to their membership, and we're making the best choice possible for this year.
Okay, great. I don't have anything further. I don't see any other hands up unless there's something, Director Salazar, you wanted to add. I think we can move on from this item.
I appreciate
you.
your time. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here tonight. All right, going back to my agenda. We are on to our consent items, and I have now put them in alphabetical order, so we'll take them in that order. And Councilor Cassett, you wanted to pull item A, which maybe I should tell people what that is. The City of Santa Fe employee, nope, wrong, hold on. Request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the total amount of $100,000 from a legislative appropriation to FY22 budget for diaper changing stations.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, James and Sam, for being here. I was really excited when we got this funded in last year's session, so I'm really happy to see the dollars come through. I was just curious, how many stations are we going to be able to get and install with $100,000?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, we are getting 48 diaper changing stations, and it will be in 21 different city facilities.
Wonderful. I will not ask you to read them off right now, but I would appreciate a list when you get an opportunity. And just to confirm, we are going to be, this is a gender equity piece as well. So these will not just be installed in women's restrooms, but it will also be installed in men's restrooms, gender neutral restrooms, and family rooms, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, yes, ma'am. I have a little list. It's going to be mainly public facilities that are used by the public in the city, recreation centers, Monaco Ball Center, library. I added the fire station, the main building where the public goes into, Fire Station 1 as well, and various recreation parks around the city as well.
Wonderful. And if you could email me that list, that would be great. I really appreciate that. And it looks like Councilwoman Villarreal also requested that, and probably everybody on the committee. So thank you again. Thank you for this work. I am excited that we're finally moving forward with this. As y'all know, I have a 3-year-old, so diaper changing stations were a big part of my life for a number of years. Hopefully we're moving out of that. So thank you all for this work on this, and I will move for approval.
Second.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Garduno, do we know if there are diaper changing stations in the restrooms that we're constructing downtown across from the Hotel Santa Fe? Are they part of the original scope of work, or will we be including them after the fact?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, they will be included in the restrooms that we're getting installed.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. So we had a motion. I'm not sure. Did we have a second? Okay, Councilwoman Villarreal. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve this item. Can we take a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell,
yes,
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
and Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes, and I do think we should put in the packet the list of where these are going as this moves forward to the governing body. I think the public probably would like to know. So thank you for being here tonight. All right, moving on. We are going to item M. Councilwoman Villarreal. No, Councilor Lindell pulled this item. Request for approval of amendment number 1 to contract 21-1335 with HomeWise to amend the scope of work and increase the amount of mortgage principal reduction assistance per household from $30,000 to $80,000. And I believe we have Alexandra Ladd here to answer questions. So Councilor Lindell.
thank you. Just one really quick question on this. We're going from 30,000 to 80,000. And we only have 300,000 allocated. But in the memo, it says as a direct result of this, 5 to 10 households would be able to attain the dream of home ownership. It seems like 300,000 is pretty limited amount. We aren't going to get 5 to 10 if we're giving each one 80. We're really only at 3 and a bit of a fraction. Is that the best use to take ourselves just to 3 instead of, if we were at 30, we'd have 10? And I realize that, you know, the housing costs have gone up so much, but we can't find 10 households that the $30,000 would be the difference for them to get into a home.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, thank you for asking that question, because I think it's a really important one right now. The real estate market is like nothing any of us working in this field have ever seen in terms of how much prices have gone up, but also just the lack of choices. Like there's just not that much for sale. We're ramping up for some new home construction, so that will help within the next year or so. When TR Contenta Phase 3 comes online, that will also help start a pipeline for folks who can buy much more affordable homes. But right now, those buyers, and for the CDBG program, these buyers cannot earn more than 80% of the area median income. Many of them earn substantially less than that. So we've got buyers in the pipeline who are mortgage ready. They've completed all of their home buyer training and counseling. They've been working, many of them, for years to pay off their debt, to save money. And they simply cannot buy a home even with $30,000. So when HomeWise tells us, hey, if we could give some of these families, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, if we could give them additional resources, we can close some of these home purchases. We can actually get some of these families into homes. So I do want to emphasize that this is need-based. This is not just everybody walking through the door gets $80,000. Many of these families will get much less. Some of them will probably get less than $30,000. But we just want to make sure that those home buyers who are in the pipeline and ready to go, that $30,000 limit isn't what keeps them from buying a home. That's the intention here. I also want to add that HomeWise in particular has a balance of program income for this community development block grant program. And what this means is that they've had CDBG loans pay off recently. HUD rules require that they use that income first before they can even touch the $300,000. So here they are, all these people they could help, and that $30,000 limit is actually keeping not only the families from purchasing a home, but from keeping them from drawing down on their entitlement grant amount, because they have to spend the program income first.
I appreciate it. I'll move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of this item. Can you call the roll, please? Well, actually, before I do that, were there any other questions from the committee? Sorry about that. I don't see any, so if we could call the roll. Thank you. Do we have somebody to call the roll?
Madam Chair, I can go ahead and call the roll.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Signe Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councilor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes.
Councilor Jamie Cassett.
Yes.
Councilor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We are on to item N. Councilor Lindell, you also pulled this item, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to transfer $1 million from the capital impact fees roads fund to parks. WIP construction for the design and construction of a connector road through Swan Park. And Melissa McDonald, our Parks and Open Space Division Director, is here. There she is. And also Regina Wheeler with Public Works Director here as well.
Thank you, Chair. I actually didn't intend to pull this. M was what I intended to pull. I was concerned with this, that I did have a conversation earlier today with Director Wheeler about the capital improve these funds. We have two different sources, road impact fees and park impact fees. And I really was not clear about the use of road impact fees for streets, which I don't consider this a street, that they are to be used for arterial or collector streets. I didn't really consider this a street. We had a discussion about it. I wasn't going to pull it, but that was the discussion that we had. Maybe someone else has something to say about this. I'll yield the floor.
All right, other questions from the committee? Do either of our directors want to speak to this? Just general information since we kept you.
I'll pull this item, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you. I think what would be helpful for all of us is to understand what is allowable for what can be used for the for roads, for the impact fee, the road impact fees, what it can go towards, because we'd always been told collector and arterial. And so if we can get information, I think the CIAC got a presentation and more information. So if that, I mean, I went back to try to read that stuff. There was so much there that I didn't have time. So I think it would be helpful to give us a clear indication that that's not going to be an issue for this, and that it's going towards more of the park infrastructure, which also includes access. So if we could just understand that, and I think Melissa or Director McDonald, we talked briefly about it. So I guess that I understand the reason why you're doing that. So we can have other funds to go towards park needs. I just don't want to deplete the little we have from impact fees for roads. And then trying to understand how you all decide to prioritize, because I know some of it comes from our CIP requests to get on that list of roads. And then there's like bigger picture items that we want to think about holistically, like what are we going to need in the future proactively for road construction, whether it's affordable housing development or other things that we need to think about in the future. And then there's some stuff that also I think you're using it to fill the gap for some funding needs on roads. So I know we're not talking about roads, so I think it would be helpful to probably have if you want to share anything now, but I think I'm going to have more of a conversation to understand the road priorities with the impact fees, because we're not seeing it yet here, but we will be seeing it apparently. And I just want to understand that. And also I think all of us should know the legality of the roads and what is required. I know there's state statute, and then we also have city impact fee requirements. And are those two aligning? And so I think that would be helpful to get that information. I think it was in the CIAC packet, but we didn't get it here. This is just it's just a bar. So I think that would be helpful to get additional information about the process of prioritization for impact fees in general and how we allocate them.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about that. We did That was part of our presentation to the CIAC as well. Besides the presentation from Assistant City Attorney Patricia Vigali, who clarified that yes, the city and the state code are in alignment, but the state code is vague and hard to understand and does kind of, if you just look at that one little sentence that they have, it does sound like only collector and arterials are eligible, but actually in the definition of capital improvements, it includes a broader definition, as does our city code. And it's actually an important distinction that the MPO pointed out, that if you want to cause sprawl in your community, you'll only invest your impact fees in big roads, and you'll really, what you really want to have is a very vibrant, productive, multimodal road network in your city. And that's what this road adds. It's a big addition of pedestrian and bicycle facilities to get to this regional park, with the growth that's coming up in that area with Tierra Contenta Phase 3, and with Swan Park being in the top 5 priority for the governing body that went to the on the ICIP this year. And actually it has been for a few years. So we've been working with the community on Swan Park Phase 2 for a number of years. But to address your question about priorities, it actually goes along with what we just said. The governing body has a number of opportunities to set priorities for us for capital projects on an annual basis. When we adopt a transportation master plan, or when we adopt the ICIP, and our transportation master plans have some really important projects on them and that are being funded by impact fees right now. So actually, ultimately, it's those sort of annual either funding cycles or governing body priority communications that actually become the priorities for the impact fees, because road projects are expensive, and we don't generally try to fund a whole road project out of impact fees. It's usually a couple of $1 million. In fact, just a good example of that is the Montezuma Sandoval intersection. It's at 1.5 million now. That's just headlights and pedestrian at one intersection. And so what we generally do is we take the priorities set by the governing body, we work with DOT to give us a majority of the funding, and then we use the impact fees as we need, like 100,000 more or 200,000 or even 5 or 800,000, and then it's available there. Right now, just to share with you some of the, so we do have a balance of 1.5 million, even with all of these projects that I'm about to name already having been allocated some funds. So we have the Agua Fria South Meadows intersection improvements are funded with some impact fees right now, very important area of growth and development. Arroyo de los Chamisos Crossing has quite a bit of funding, and we'll probably be seeking more as we move into the next phase of that. Camino Entrada Roundabout, where the Southside Transit Center will be, and there's quite a bit of business growth there. Richards Avenue, Beckner Road signal has been allocated impact fees. Agua Fria, South Meadows again. Henry Lynch reconstruction. That road is seriously underserved in that community. And so we got an $800,000 funding for that. And so we used matching funds from impact fees. And then of course, the Paseo del Sol extension, super high priority for our recent approval of Tierra Contenta Phase 3. We were able to get $800,000 from DOT for that project. We've actually in the process of working up the agreement with Tierra Contenta so that we can allocate those funds to them for the design of Paseo del Sol. So it is, we're very dynamic in our capital. We have big, gigantic lists, and then we narrow them down as they become urgent. But and just to say one more thing, the road impact fees have $1.5 million balance now, but that doesn't count the impact fees collected in the past year. So we haven't got a fully audited balance. So there's quite a bit of funds. And then last but not least, Councilor Villarreal, in our dynamic response to our needs for capital, you raised the issue about really doing a study for Agua Fria with the development that we're seeing there. And I conferred with Eric Ani, as he said, that he definitely thinks it's time for MPO to take a sort of a immediate, medium, and long-term look at Agua Fria and really start putting that on our radar for major project, whatever that needs and in whatever time frame. So I think the impact fees are really working well. The road impact fees are being leveraged well, and I think Swan Park's a really high priority. So we're glad that we can get this piece done with impact fees.
Thank you for that additional information. I think I was thinking about what you said about MPO, that just supporting larger roads contributes to sprawl. I've heard the opposite too, saying that using impact fees for smaller roads can become more political because they're less part of the whole network. And then there's these smaller roads in certain districts that start getting funded. So there's two probably differences of opinion, and maybe both are true. So I think just to note that. When are we going to see the road impact fee request?
I'm sorry, Madam
recommend-
Chair, Counselor, can you be more specific?
Well, right now we're seeing how we're utilizing some of the impact fees for parks, or in this case for Swan Park, but I'm just curious, the ones that you just listed off, are we going to see that coming through committee soon?
You already have, they've already been allocated, and to the extent that any of them are over the $60,000 bar, they have come through the governing body. But let's see, Henry Lynch, yeah, you have seen them
We've
all.
seen all those, but I'm wondering, are those all going to be utilizing impact fees to fill the gap?
They
Because
will.
there's other funds that we also approved, correct?
Correct.
For those, okay. So is there any other impact fee related projects that we'd be seeing as it relates to this budget adjustment time period that we're doing?
Right at this very moment, I think you've seen them. I'm not, Romella is processing a couple of them that she just got approved, and I'm not sure if they've already been by this or not. I have to check them. But that list is complete. So you've either seen them or you'll see them any minute. And then as we continue to get funding from DOT, and as we continue to have needs, right now DOT is offering us more funds sort of behind the scenes. So we're working with them on specific needs, and wherever we can't meet some of our specific needs, we may be back. For instance, the other Agua Fria Rafina intersection, the other intersection, South Meadows Rafina, is needing funds, but DOT seems to be ready to fund that. So we'll kind of work in between DOT and impact fees as necessary.
Okay, maybe I'll just talk with you to figure out what we've seen and what we haven't. Because it was my understanding that some of the impact fees and distributing them, we hadn't even had a full balance, or it was an unaudited balance for the impact fee fund. So I'm not quite sure how we make allocations from that when we don't exactly know the balance. So I'm wondering if finance could give us some insight on when we'll be able to get the impact fee fund balance, the updated.
Madam Chair, Counselor, yes, I'm happy to answer that. With the completion of the trial balance, we will have the unaudited numbers for FY20. The audited numbers for FY21 are audited and complete, but it's the FY21 that is unaudited, and that we will have completed at the end of March with the final trial balance.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, if I could, we're working, as I said, we're not trying to allocate any of those funds from the last year that haven't been sort of audited and added to the fund. We're using just working away at an older balance that was provided.
And the older balance for the roads section, you said was what? 1.5?
We still have, after current allocations, 1.5 million.
Okay. That's fiscal year.
That's our account balance, we believe, after allocations as of January 31st, 2022, based on a balance about a year ago.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all I have for now. I'll probably follow up with you, Director Wheeler, just to understand some of the stuff that was presented to CIAC, which we didn't see, obviously, but just to understand what was presented and how it applies to impact fees and what, not just the existing balance, but the funding that we'll be having in the future too, in the near future for this next fiscal year. So I think that's it. I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
And Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Now we're on to item Q. Councilwoman Villarreal, you also pulled this item, request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the Economic Development Department in the amount of $250,000 to fund a feasibility study and architectural plans for Lucero Crossing LEDA manufacturing expansion. And I believe we do have Director Brown here.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Brown, for being with us. Can you tell us more about this project and how it came about and actually where Lucero Crossing is located?
Sure. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council, Councilor Villarreal. So the idea for the crossing, which is actually at the intersection of 599 and South Meadows, there's a tract of land of 40 acres that the state has leased to the city of Santa Fe for 50 years, and it's be used specifically for economic development purposes. Right now, the firehouse is going to be built in a portion of it, so that if that gives you some reference. The idea around the Lucero crossing, it's a project name right now, it could be the real name, but it's our project name, is that I think Mr. Fletch talked about the growth of our GRT, mainly with technology, but also our food innovation sector is starting to explode. And we have a food business here that's about to have its second large expansion because they're now selling nationwide and they're going into e-commerce and freeze-dried foods. And one of the things we don't want to do is that we're competing with Boulder, Colorado for them to set up their massive expansion for manufacturing. We'd like to keep the jobs and the manufacturing here in the city. So when we looked at this piece of land that the state said used for economic development purposes, we decided that this would be a place to put in a manufacturing hub and particularly a science hub because that's a part of what we're trying to do to diversify our economy. So that's the reason, the genesis of the idea. And then as we started talking, we looked at the community development side and realized that there's a food desert on that side of town. And so we've had some preliminary conversations with the Food Depot, who's looking at creating a nonprofit food store. And so it might also be located in that area on the piece of land. And with available space left, we may include essential worker housing because this expansion will require jobs. And we're hoping that this company will hire up to 60 people over 5 years from that standpoint. So there's a lot of economic impact that we're looking at. And so we're at the starting gate with a feasibility study and partially an architectural plan that comes forward.
Thank you. Remind me what you just said. You said 40 acres that the state leases?
The state, yeah, Councilor Villarreal, the state owns the land, but they've leased it to the city of Santa Fe for economic development purposes. And these are the specific purposes to use. And so LEDA stands for LEDA, or the Local Economic Development Act. So these are LEDA projects where we promote, incentivize local companies to expand in the city of Santa Fe. So they're tied into LEDA because they're economic based and sell part of their product or service nationwide. And all the gross revenue tax comes back to the city.
Yes, thank you. And that actually leads me to my other question about LEDA. So when we have projects like this or hubs, there's also, we usually use LEDA funds that come from economic development related revenues. And in this case, this is coming from the general fund.
The Councilor Villarreal, the 250 is just the first phase, it's feasibility. So it come from the general fund from GRT. And so think of it as we're leveraging this growth GRT we're getting from our technology industry and using it to expand out. So that's what the first 250 would come from. As we build out this hub, we may look at getting a bond, industrial revenue bond, or a regular general obligation bond to actually build out these fixtures that we would use to lease to companies for their expansion. Because we don't own the land, so we'd have to lease it out.
Okay, so in the future then, our LEDA funds that come through your department could be used for what aspect of this project potentially?
The LEDA funds could be used for the building of a specific building. LIDA funds can be used for that. So we'll partner with the state of New Mexico. They're very interested in diversifying our economy. So we'll use a sort of matching grant with them and matching grants for us. And so the city may be using its funds to build the actual hub buildings and then have the potential growth companies build out the interiors. And so that's where they can then find their own capital financing and then lease it back from the city from that standpoint, since we're all in a lease arrangement.
Got it. Okay. I think that's all I have.
If I could, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, to your point about LIDA, just FYI, we have two other LIDA projects coming down the pike. They're both doing expansion. One is for jobs expansion. The other one is for building a manufacturing hub. So you'll see a different way of using LIDA for business expansion. So in the next 2 weeks, we'll be back with two more that are actually more shovel ready than this one.
Thank you for that additional information. I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cassett.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will be very brief. Just wanted to make a quick comment on something that really excites me here is looking at the nonprofit food co-op and really looking at the food desert in this area. This has been a area of much concern in my world. And so I'm really excited about this potential partnership, and I will want to be getting a lot of updates on this one. So just a heads up, Rich, and we'll probably pull this to quality of life at some point as well. But thank you for really looking at that aspect of it too, because that is part of, that broader view of economic development and what is really needed in our community to make sure that we have a thriving, healthy community. And as we're bringing in these new workers, as well as many of the individuals who are already living in this area. So thank you for your attention there and your work on that. That's all.
Welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we call the roll on approval of this LIDA funding?
Yes. Councillor Vieira,
Yes.
Councillor Cassett,
Yes.
Councillor Lindell,
Yes.
Councillor Rivera,
Yes.
and Councillor O'Meara Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That item passes. We are on two more. We have item R. Councilwoman Villarreal, you pulled this along with Councillor Lindell, request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the Arts and Culture Department in the amount of $300,000 to fund community gallery, citywide exhibition and programming, arts education, cultural investment funding program, and Culture Connects focused projects and programming. I'm not sure, Director Brown, are you on for this?
Yeah. Madam
right.
Chair, thank you very much. Director Kamiana is on leave, and so she is not here to answer questions. I don't know if I can answer all of your questions, but I can definitely take them and then get back to you on what she wants to do from the standpoint of the Arts and Culture Department.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Councilwoman Villarreal, if you want to start, and then we'll go to Councillor Lindell.
Madam Chair, I actually didn't pull this item. I think I was just repeating that you pulled item R. So I think it's Councillor Lindell.
Okay, sorry.
We've been tossing this back and forth some. I have a fair number of questions about this, and I'm wondering if it wouldn't be more prudent to make a motion to postpone until our next meeting, which I'm going to make. I have a fair number of questions about this, so I'm going to make a motion to postpone to our next meeting when the director's here.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to postpone to our next meeting. Is there discussion? Councilwoman Villarreal?
Madam Chair, just to confirm, what's that date then? So it will still go to the other committees and it would go back to finance on the, what day is that?
March 21st?
Correct.
So.
And will the director be back for that meeting?
Madam Chair, yes, I will make sure she is here for that meeting to answer your questions. And then Council Lindell, if you have any questions you want to send over, I can definitely have her respond to them so that she's prepared for the meeting.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
So just to look at the schedule, committee schedule, we had quality of life, and then there's public works, and it's planned to go to the city council on March 9th. So that delays it. How many?
Couple of weeks.
So what does that mean for their projects? To delay that 2 weeks?
Madam Chair, Council Varial, I can get that question answered. I don't expect that they are, shotgunned in the next couple of weeks. So, but I will get an answer to that question. I know there's quite a lot of them that she wants to launch, but I will find out that answer.
Okay, well, I'll yield the floor for now.
Councilor Cassett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rich, when will Pauline be back from leave?
She should be back tomorrow.
So she would be there for the quality of life meeting on Wednesday. So procedural question, Councilor Romeroworth, I don't know if you know the answer to this. If it goes to quality of life, passes quality of life, technically it moves on to the governing body because that's when it's scheduled for on March 9th. So I'm just curious about that. Do we have?
No, but remember you have the ability to hold it here.
And we,
then I don't.
For contracts as well? We just talked about
legislation. Yes, this is a contract, not legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Madam Chair, this is technically a budget adjustment, not a contract.
Still not legislation, but thank you.
Correct. So we don't get to. I'm just trying to look here. So our next, let's see, we're into March. Yeah, so then it would, if it didn't come back to finance until the 21st, it wouldn't go to the council until the 30th of March. And back to your question, Councilor Cassett. So I don't know, but I don't think any of that applies, right?
Any of what? I lost you.
Yeah, sorry. No, but the fact that it's passed one committee means it goes back to, it doesn't mean that it goes on to governing body, does it?
It means it goes on to governing body, but not necessarily to consent.
I don't know, because that's legislation.
Okay.
And we have a motion here to bring it back.
Yeah.
We can consult. I mean, I think the bigger question is it time sensitive, and will it going to the governing body on the 30th of March instead of our meeting next week? Is that going to mess anything up?
Right.
And we can consult with the city attorney's office on whether what we're doing here and bringing it back is okay. Oh, we have the city manager here.
That's handy.
Hello, how are you all?
Hello, city manager.
So my knowledge of the procedures is online with yours, so I'm not able to be helpful for you. But if you all are sort of unsure, go, no go, we are pushing as hard as we can to get this money out the door, get it spent before the end of the fiscal year. And so is it an emergency? No, nothing's on fire.
No.
But do we want to make sure we can get it spent as quickly as possible for the benefit of the citizens of Santa Fe? Absolutely. So if you're 50-50 and leading a push, consider that my push.
And we're trying to.
Councilor Lindell.
I mean, even if we go until the end of March, we have plenty of time to disperse this money by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, and Counselor Cassett, I don't think you gave up the floor. Back to you.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Apparently I don't have anything worthwhile to say as I'm just sitting here stammering over my words. Definitely, that is my only concern, is that since, as Pauline is not here to speak to that piece of the concern about it being able to get out, I think that's where I'm really struggling, is because I don't know what the impact would be for us bringing it back to finance.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Counselor Lindell, if this is something that we might be able to discuss, and that if there's not an impact, that this could be something that we could address at quality of life. Since we will be there Wednesday and Pauline would be there to speak to that, and we'd have some opportunity to speak with her, and then we could figure that out. I think that's just my only concern, is not knowing what the impact of delaying this would be by a couple of weeks, and if there would be an impact or if there wouldn't. So I think that's where I'm having a challenge.
Director Brown, you have something to add.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, and Councilor Cassett and Councilor Lindell. I was going to suggest, if Councilor Lindell has some questions that she'd like to get answered, and Director Kamian is not here, we could read them into the quality of life meeting and then add them to the packet as an addition to our packet, so that if it comes to the governing body on the 9th, that they will be there as a part of the reading materials, and it would just be pulled and we would discuss them to make sure that we answer them. As I look at the list, there's really only one program where I could see there's probably a longer procurement period at $120,000, but everything else seems to be under the $60,000 mark. So,
Counselor Cassett.
I don't have any other comments. I suppose I would just like to hear Counselor Lindell's thoughts on that process. I would say that at this moment, I do not feel comfortable holding it back without knowing what the impact of holding it would be. And until I get that answered, I wouldn't really want to do that, as we have another committee opportunity to take a look at it, but would be happy to work with Counselor Lindell in any capacity in order to make sure that that those questions are answered at the Quality of Life Committee, which I recognize Counselor Lindell does not sit on. So that does.
Right, so I would not have a vote.
right.
Counselor Cassett.
That is all. I will give up the floor at this moment.
Counselor Linda Ariel.
Well, looking at the schedule, there's still opportunities to ask questions and vote at the governing body meeting next week. So even though there's committee processes, all of us will get another chance to talk about them, and quality of life or public works. And I realize Councilor Lindell's not on those, but governing body, we also can pull items off consent to talk about and ask any additional questions that maybe you didn't get answered in, like, talking with staff directly. So there is an opportunity to pull it again in governing body. Just a thought.
Counselor Lindell.
So I'll withdraw my motion because I'll go ahead and ask my questions now, and that's what I'll do. But Councilor Rivera, will you withdraw your second?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Do I have the floor, Chair?
Yes, you do.
Okay. My concerns about this are that we can go through each one of these separately. $50,000 for community gallery, citywide exhibition programming. The thing that concerns me about this entire packet is that there's no specificity to it. I don't know who is leading these programs. I don't know who is making the decisions on them. I don't know what the application process is. I don't know what the qualification process is. And it bothers me that they're all for an amount of money that in terms of contractually, they never will come back to any committee. They will just be put forth and signed by the city manager. And I think that some of these, I mean, in the first one, $50,000 community gallery, what are programming costs for $25,000? I'd like a breakdown of that. I know what installation is. I don't really know what workforce development training is needed for this kind of program. Going on to the next one, $15,000 for Culture Connects. That's three $5,000 mini grants. I mean, what's the who does that get put out to for $5,000? What's the selection? Who does the selection on that? $15,000 for arts education, 3 mini grants for another $5,000. How do these things work? But $120,000 for cultural investment funding program. I really don't know what that is. I'd like to know who the other recipients were. It would be nice to have a list of the recipients of these monies. And it looks like all this is saying, well, we got 24 recipients. Let's give each one of them another $5,000. That seems indiscriminate to me and not based on needs or really any criteria. That bothers me. The $50,000 for Culture Connects FE Must campaign, I really don't know anything about that. I've never heard about it before. How does that work for the city? What does that do, as these are local cultural bearers? I recognize all of these people, of course, but how is that they are ambassadors to cultural tourism for the city? And who selects them? How does this work? I really think that these are so open-ended that I have no idea why I am funding these or what the criteria or who the lead is on them. $50,000 for Culture Connects, a cultural history virtual reality tour. I don't know what that is. It's $50,000. Who selects? Who does that? What are we expecting for that? And who uses it? And how does that get out to the public? I just think this packet is it really doesn't have enough detail for me to want to say yes to funding this $300,000. There's so little detail in it. I don't know who decides. I don't know the criteria. I think that this packet really needs a fair amount of work. So I'll yield the floor, Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Director Brown, I don't know, you probably can't do much with that without the director being here. Your hand's up, so I'll call on you and then we'll go to other questions from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilor Lindell. Thank you for your comments and feedback. I do want to share with the committee that keep in mind that these programs, we only have about 3 months to implement them. And so there is a lot of sausage making that happens at the staff level that will come back. And I think Councilor Lindell is right that some of them may not make the governing body, but we do have the opportunity to express what they all are in detail. And this memo definitely would not show who the lead is, what the impact is, et cetera, et cetera. But those things can be responded to So I recognize that it may not be clear, and I'm hoping that to most of you that you do understand what the Arts and Culture Department's trying to do, but I recognize that they need a little bit more specificity once the money is in place. So consider it a title with an overview, and that we would definitely flesh it out and be more than happy to come back to the Quality of Life Committee, to the governing body, to show what's happening. But the 3-month period, we're going to be scrambling to get those sausage made, to get it out and get it done. But as Councilor Lindell has given her questions and feedback, I will get it to Director Kamiana, and hopefully can respond to some of it by Quality of Life and to the governing body meeting.
Okay, back to me. Other questions from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Do we have a second? How about, well, we don't have a second. How about,
Madam Chair, I'll second for purposes of discussion.
okay, or we could move it forward without recommendation. That's another way to do it. Counselor Cassett, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was going to recommend moving forward without recommendation, with the understanding that we would have this conversation at Quality of Life. And also, I know that Councilor Lindell does not have a vote at Quality of Life, but I'd be happy to bring up the discussion of whether or not holding this until the end of March, what type of impact that would have, and then potentially exploring that with the Quality of Life Committee to send it back to Finance, and recognizing that there had been a request for it to go back to Finance. So that was going to be my recommendation, was to move it forward without recommendation.
Okay, and we could also get some answers to some of these questions through Quality of Life and offline. All right, is there other discussions on the motion before us, which is to approve?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Rivera.
So if it went, it's clearly going to Quality of Life and then Public Works. If Director Kamiyama returned and said that there's, no, we can wait until the last meeting in March to take it to the governing body, one of those committees can always recommend that it come back to Finance, correct, for the March 21st meeting?
Yes.
Right. And would that be affected by whether we do a motion to approve or a motion to move on without a recommendation?
I don't think it would be affected one way or the other. I just think if we feel as a group that we don't have enough information and we'd like more, and since we don't have the director here, one path forward would be to move it forward without a recommendation versus approving it, which suggests that we're okay with it.
Right. Well, I am okay with it. I just want Councilor Lindell's question.
Right.
I want to give her the ability to ask her questions and have them answered. So.
Right.
Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my second and I think support Councilwoman Cassett's recommendation.
All right, so I don't think we have a second for the motion, so we can offer that, so that motion fails for lack of a second. So I can entertain another motion.
I move it forward to Quality of Life without recommendation.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to move this item forward without recommendation. Is there discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call, please.
Yeah. Councilor Villarreal.
I'll abstain.
Councilor Cassett.
Yes.
Councilor Lindell.
Yes.
Councilor Rivera.
Yes.
And Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, so we'll move it forward without recommendation. We are on to our final item of the night, which is Item AB. Hold on, let me get there. Request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution in the Community Services Department in the amount of $1 million to fund eviction prevention. Julie Sanchez, Youth and Family Services Division Director, is here. Don't think is Kira here too? I don't see Kira. All right, so we have Julie Sanchez here and Counselor Lindell. I got it right this time. You pulled this item.
I did.
For.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Julie. Again, I mean, I have numerous questions about this, but I'm bothered by the lack of detail of this packet being asked to fund $1 million based on a packet that gives us 2 paragraphs and not much detail. I think it's probably an ask that, well, let me just go through some questions on this. How much CARES and ARPA money have we already dedicated to rental assistance?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, for ARPA money, so far, I haven't heard that any funding has been dedicated to rental assistance. For CARES Act money, we actually saw a wide array of, we didn't just fund rental assistance through CARES, but we gave options for community members. And so what we saw was about 85 to 90% of our CARES Act funding of the, I think we got about, oh my gosh, 5.5 million. That all went to rental assistance. And that was from March of 2019 through December of 2020.
What was the number you said, Julie? I'm sorry.
For CARES Act, for what the Youth and Family Services Division was allocated, it was about 5.5 million, I believe.
Okay.
Roughly about 90% went to housing related issues.
And we did have $1 million in ARPA monies from the county, I believe, that was this year that the county directed to us for rental assistance. So we've had a pretty sizable amount. Do people qualify for this as COVID? Do they have to? Does this have to be COVID related?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, yes, because it is ARPA funding, there does have to be a COVID related incident.
So this $1 million that we're talking about here, this isn't ARPA money though.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, that's my, yes, it's not ARPA funding. That's my
Madam Chair, Councilor, I can confirm that the $1 million that is before you for approval tonight is not funded by the federal allocation to the city of Santa Fe for ARPA. It is funded through additional gross receipts taxes.
So distribution of this money is not dependent on it being associated with COVID, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, my understanding is we would be able to set our own eligibility criteria for this funding since it is GRT funds.
Right. Have we set any criteria for distribution of these monies?
We have not, but it's something that we would love to work on in tandem with members of this committee who are interested in being a part of that process.
Well, I think I think that would be wonderful. The thing that concerns me is that if we pass this, we don't have any criteria on it. And how do we set up so that we do have criteria on it? It just concerns me to pass $1 million allotment out of our GRT when we don't have any criteria on distribution. I mean, it doesn't have to be COVID related. Does the distribution go to first come, first serve? Who owes the most? Who owes the least? The amount of time that you've been in arrears on your rent? Are people eligible to receive rental assistance more than once if they've already received it? Another criteria that concerns me is we don't have any way of following this money, or we haven't previously, to know that these monies that are distributed for rental assistance end up being paid to the landlord. It seems like we could come up with some criteria on how this is allocated and that it ends up being spent that follows the purpose of the allocation. But I don't think that we've done that. And I'm concerned about it. We've distributed well over $5 million, and we have 2 more million, if this is passed, to distribute. And this money's coming out of our GRT. This isn't federal or state money. Additionally, from the packet, it says that the state still has 75 million left, and that there's an expectation of 152 million more. Additionally, from the packet, it says that March 1st is the end of the state moratorium. Councilor Romero Worth informed me today that that is not the case. I don't think there is a date specific. But those are real concerns that I have, that we need to find some criteria of how we do this and make sure that this money is distributed in a way that we want it to be distributed, and that there is criteria, and that it is used with the purpose that we do distribute it. So those are my initial comments on this, Chair. I'll yield the floor on this.
Okay, Counselor, looks like both Julie Sanchez and our city manager have their hands up to respond to your concerns. I'd like to give them the opportunity. I don't know in which order to take you. So maybe you all want to do a quick.
I'll defer to Julie. Go ahead.
All
Julie.
right.
So thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell. I appreciate your concern. We did have precedents set when we did our CARES Act allocation for our eviction prevention funds, and that's actually the eligibility criteria that we were going to continue to use for this particular eviction prevention program. So I just wanted
City Manager Blair.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, thank you so much for the questions. So there's some information in the packet I'm not going to be able to give you in this hot moment, and I apologize for that. Director Ochoa had a conflict this evening and was unable to be here, and so I apologize for that as well. She has been eyebrow deep in police chief search for a little while, so she had some other things to do tonight. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, the federal money that's out there has proven to be throughout this pandemic difficult for many people to reach. There are a number of requirements that people who are in threat of eviction have to provide that not everybody has. When I first graduated college and moved to Washington, D.C., I lived in a house with 5 other people. It was like the real world without the TV cameras or cool people. And we shared a lease, but my name wasn't on the lease. I gave cash to the person whose name was on the leash for the 6 of us, and they paid. So one of the requirements to get funding from ERAP is a copy of your lease. I would have failed for that right out of college. And so part of what the effort that we're doing now and trying to bring this $1 million is that it's for direct cash assistance to those who are frankly the most in need. And it does the most good. So in my distinguished 5.5-week tenure here at the city, my understanding is that we have in the past provided direct cash assistance to people in Santa Fe, and it's proven to be very helpful. As we've been having conversations over the last few weeks in City Hall with Mayor Weber and our team, he has exhibited this frustration that I think, Councilor Lindell, you may share as well, which is if there's all these hundreds of millions of dollars out there to give, why aren't we just using that money? And frankly, it's very difficult to get. And so what we are facing right now is it may not be tomorrow, it may not be Wednesday, but in the next week or two, we do expect to see a number of people in Santa Fe suddenly evicted from their homes. And we are trying to utilize every tool in our tool belt to keep that from happening, because those people who are being evicted are those most in need and who most need our help. In addition to the money we're trying to get here, City Attorney Aaron McSherry is working to pull together an eviction legal fair. That's not the right term, but an eviction event this Saturday where we get lawyers to volunteer their time to help those who are most in need navigate this process to try to help them get the paperwork together to file for the ERAP, for the rental assistance. And so the reason that we're asking you to support this funding now is because we've seen that it works, and it works better than anything else for keeping people in their homes. So there are some questions, Councilor Lindell, that you have that I think are great. And I'm sorry that I'm not in a position, and I think Julie isn't necessarily in a position to answer them as well either. This is not something we're starting from scratch. It's not something we're doing for the first time. And I think if you all were to support moving this forward to the next committee, we're not planning to swindle anybody. We're not planning to pull a fast one and rush it to governing body on consent without everyone getting their questions answered. What we're asking for is your assistance in moving this forward as quickly as possible, because if we do wait until the end of March, it may not be 5,000 homes that are affected in Santa Fe, but we will see people evicted, and there's a good chance we could have helped them. And so while, again, we're not able to answer all of your questions, we do seek your support in helping move this forward. And I can guarantee you, we will get you those answers to your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilor Lindell.
I believe that we've lost our chair.
Was it something I said?
Maybe. One moment. I will be calling our chair. Councilor Merworth just texted me. Apparently she is having some internet problems.
Well, I don't mind taking over until she gets back. So Counselor Lindell, I believe you still have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. City Manager Blair, I appreciate that.
Excuse me, Madam Chair requested that we hold conversation. She is trying to connect. She just lost her connection. So if we can hold further conversation on this matter until she rejoins momentarily.
Sure.
What's everyone having for dinner tonight? As we sit in awkward Zoom silence.
I'm happy to share leftover birthday cake if anybody wants.
I may drive over and get that because I've been craving cookies and just have not had the time to make them. But I have this like great tahini chocolate chip cookie recipe from the New York Times that I am just really itching to try. You put like flaky salt on top of it.
If I may, Director Ochoa stepped out of her other commitment. And so Director Ochoa, first of all, thank you. We lost the chair for just a moment and she asked that we not do any business, but.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
In light of you stepping away, Councilor Lindell had some questions about how the direct cash assistance would work. What is the criteria? Who gets the money? In what order?
Right.
Et cetera.
Okay. Would you like me to wait till the chair returns to answer those questions?
I believe so. I'm seeing some shaking heads.
Okay.
While we're waiting, if I may ask, Councilor Lindell, were there any other questions that I failed to mention for Director Ochoa that she can think about while we're waiting for the chair?
I don't know that Director Ochoa was on when I was talking about my concerns about the process with this. There's the chair.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening.
Madam Chair, Director Ochoa has been able to join us.
Okay. Where are we here?
I'm trying to ask. I'm trying to follow up and ask some questions from City Manager Blair. So this money, because it's GRT money, it doesn't even have to be rental assistance based on it doesn't have to be COVID related. I don't know that we have a criteria that it is COVID related. I mean, I in this memo, we need to know what our criteria is for we're being asked for $1 million of GRT money with no idea of what the criteria for distribution is.
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, if I may. Madam Chair?
Yes, yes, sorry.
Sorry, my connection is not great either.
My
So
connection-
to answer your question, Councilor Lindell, the criteria for disbursement is that people are facing eviction, obviously. And everybody's situation is a little bit different when they're facing eviction. Some people, as you know, have legitimate leases. Some people are doubling up in other people's homes. And that has made, as Director Sanchez may have said, getting those state funds very difficult for some people. The beauty of the partnership we've had with FII, now called Up Together, is that we at the city get to define the criteria. So with our cash disbursement in CARES, which we used the same company for, we had to get that money out very quickly. It was a very different situation. And we had 3 different sets of criteria that are outlined actually in the report that Julie sent everyone a little earlier, which we had previously shared with the council. We can define what the criteria is, and we can define what the requirements are for proving the need. And it doesn't have to be as strict as the state process, and it doesn't have to be as liberal and open-ended as we were in our CARES disbursement. We have the ability, and you will see that in the contract that will come before you, to outline the criteria and gauge how the funds are dispersed.
Well, I think that would be really helpful to us. I'm not sure. I mean, has that criteria been developed? Do we know what it is?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, yes. When we partnered with Chainbreaker on the previous disbursement of cash, they were very interested in using the application process to collect data on the state of tenants who were in need. What they did was they provided a screening for us in the first round and determined if people were eligible according to their income, which in Santa Fe would mean an indigent level income of 400% of federal poverty or less. They determined if they were city residents, and then they determined if they were facing eviction based on an interview. In the direct cash disbursement portal that applicants will be connected to, they are directed to answer a series of questions about their status, and they attest to their status. They upload identity documents, and it's verified that they are not duplicating application. There is the possibility of putting in more strict criteria if we choose. We have found, that we try to keep it open for people who are having trouble with documentation, but that is up to us. And we have previously developed the criteria. We can share a copy of what that application looked like back in the fall when we dispersed the funds, and it can still be adjusted. The other model that we're looking at here, which is slightly different than what we did before, and provides a little more of a accountability and gatekeeping, if you will, not to use that in the negative sense, on the funds, is to have our Connect network navigators who have already determined people's need through their own agencies and our screening tool, connect certain individuals to the funding opportunities. So rather than what we did in the fall when we dispersed funds previously, was give people a link to the website where they would apply. We have the capability, since this is a somewhat slower process, to have individual navigators verify that folks are eligible, and that they will then be given a code that only pertains to them, and which they will then go through the application process. The vendor FII/Up Together verifies all the identity information and any other documents that we should require. I hope that answers the question.
Well, that's really helpful, and it would have been extremely helpful to have had all of that in the packet instead of just 2 paragraphs that really weren't that helpful. what do we pay the vendor to, what's our percent of paying the vendor to distribute this?
The previous contract, I believe, was 5% up to a certain level and then 3% after that. So it takes them a bit to set up the system and the application. And that's like 5% up to the first 100,000. And I believe they had us at 3% after that. That said, Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, we do not have a contract in place with this vendor yet. We hope that it would be an emergency procurement given the situation, and we would negotiate the terms at that time. Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, I apologize for the packet being a little thin. I'll be honest. This opportunity to, first of all, the identification of the additional funds and the opportunity to disperse the funds in the light of the looming eviction moratorium lift, which we understood was happening tomorrow, but which per City Attorney McSherry, we now understand happens closer to the end of March. The opportunity became available on Thursday, and I honestly put the packet together at that time. So I'm happy to provide any additional materials. I do feel that given the precipitous nature of the conditions in terms of what people are facing, it's very advisable to go forward in my opinion. Thank you.
Well, I mean, this is, of course, everybody would want to go forward with this, and I'm sure that eventually we will. We need to have the regular reports on this, and this is just extremely poor process, friends, to have this come to us the way that it has, and to be asked to fund out of our gross receipts tax $1 million just in the blink of an eye with very, very little information. I don't appreciate being put into that situation where I have so many questions about it. And, it looks like, oh, well, you don't support this. Well, I support it conceptually, but we need some criteria on it. And to not be presented with any criteria is not helpful for any of us. And I don't think it's right for us to be put into that position with a blink of an eye request for $1 million of GRT. I don't think there's anyone here that doesn't want to support this kind of programming, but this process is not good. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, my apologies, everyone. Not sure what happened there with my internet. Sorry to go out in a critical moment. Councilor Cassett, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that City Manager Blair raised his hand onto Councilor Lindell, so I'll defer to him.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Still reorienting.
No problem.
Major
Chair, thank you, Councilor Lindell. I just want to be clear. I apologize if any of you feel that we have put you in a tough spot. We are not trying to play games. We are not trying to make you feel uncomfortable or awkward. We are trying to move as quickly as we can with a new circumstance that frankly we weren't aware, we are trying to move in real time to help as many people as possible. I want to make it a point, because I have not been doing it enough, I've only done it twice today, to tell you how grateful I am for Director Ochoa and the heavy lift she has been doing on encampments, on evictions, on leading our police chief search. And she's doing an extraordinary job. And so if there's any hard feelings, I hope they are directed at me and not at her, because she is doing yeoman's work on behalf of all of us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, City Manager. Now I will go to Councilor Cassett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I completely understand the concern of wanting more details. And I think one of the challenges that we have here is what Director Ochoa spoke to, that Julie spoke to as well, that John spoke to, is this complication that frequently individuals who are in need see of so many barriers to have to prove that they're worthy of assistance that we frequently can't get it to them. And so while, a lot of the verification and the processes and the criteria that Director Ochoa spoke to, I'm glad that we have those in place. And, I know that we spent a lot of time talking about some of those with CARES, and this is a little bit different, but to be perfectly honest, if there is somebody that's at risk of losing their home and we give them money and they use it to pay for food, because that frees up money to pay for rent on April 1st, I'm okay with that, because it all goes to the same bucket of what expenditures they have available to them. And so I think that it is going to be hard. I think the bigger challenge is actually going to be that there are so many individuals in need. And this money is really a drop in the bucket of what we are going to be facing as a city, and how that ripple effect is going to impact our community. We know that homelessness is a huge issue. Well, the best way to solve homelessness is to prevent it. And so however we can reduce the barriers for individuals to access dollars, knowing full well that there are many individuals that are not going to be able to access dollars. It's important. And I know that it's going to be a balancing act. And I know that this is going to be a challenge for how we walk that line of, making sure that there's a criteria, making sure that we are really hitting the people that are most in need in our community, and to be able to assist them. To be honest, I do not envy you that having to figure that out, Director Ochoa and Julie. That will be, I know, a challenge, because there are so many people in our community, and this is not going to hit all of them, who are going to be facing evictions, who have really been struggling throughout this pandemic. We know that this pandemic has been inequitable in the economic impact. There are many of us that it's been challenging for everyone, but the economic impact has been tough. So I completely agree. This information has been extremely helpful in looking at how these funds get dispersed. But I really am grateful that they were found and that we are pushing them out. And honestly, I wish they were more. I wish that we could have found more. And I know that as more dollars come through, and how we're able to get those out to people in need and reduce those barriers, as more federal funds or state funds come through, I hope that we can continue to seek how we can really be assisting with this new crisis that this epidemic is bringing towards us. So thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilwoman Cassett, for those comments. I feel the same about the urgency here. And I think we all do. And frankly, this piece of funding is probably just going to be, it's not going to cover all the people that actually will be affected by eviction, because eviction will happen in different ways. I mean, I'm already seeing it with people I know where their landlords are increasing their rent just to get them out. And I'm talking significant, like they're actually increasing it by 50%. And those people don't have much time to actually adjust their living situation. And so, I mean, I think that this amount is definitely going to be able to support. It's like one level of support. I think what I hear Councilor Lindell say is our processes are not consistent. And I want to bring up that I've been having issues with our budget adjustment resolution, our budget adjustments in general, and the memos are never telling us exactly what's happening. And this happened in December, and there was like details, there weren't enough details, and I brought that up, and people let them go and just let those pass. They never actually, I think some directors actually provided us some more information if we requested it, but I'm just bringing up the structure of these is challenging for me. And I think in this case, Director Ochoa, I made assumptions that we were just going to use the structure we already had that we used with the CARES Act. So I guess that was what didn't give me consternation. So I think what we would need is just exactly what you added, all the information, details about how the funding will be dispersed and the criteria will be used that we've been using it for, in the last iteration. So I think just having that information in the next committee will be helpful, but I just want to flag that these budget adjustments become inconsistent, and depending on where it comes from and who's wanting it, there's more information and then there's less information. I actually disagree with Councilor Lindell. I think the Arts and Culture Department actually had a lot of details, more than any of the memos that we've received for other budget adjustments. So I think also I know a lot about those projects, so they kind of I don't question them because I've heard about them already in process. So, and same thing for this. I've heard about the need to do this and how we're going to do it and how we're going to disperse funds quickly. And the fact that this is happening tomorrow, even though there'll be a period of time that landlords will be able to evict people, I just think that this is urgent. So I would just urge staff to add more to the memo for the next committees, which are, well, quality of life is Wednesday, so I don't know if there's just an amendment to the memo just to add information so that we know, and then it'll go to the governing body next week. So I just wanted to talk about, I hope we can improve our processes in terms of making them consistent for, especially when it's emergency funds coming forward to us. And this is it's a big amount, so I can understand why we need the scrutiny. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to touch a minute on the March 1st deadline that's in the memo. And I don't know whether any of you can speak to this, but it's my understanding from the city attorney's office in emails where she reached out to local lawyers to help with a volunteer situation with local attorneys, meeting with people who are in these situations and helping them understand what their rights are so that they can best help themselves in these situations. And what I understand is that the Supreme Court will lift its order of a stay of eviction for the areas of the state, including Santa Fe, and that it is scheduled for March. Nobody knows when they're going to lift it. There was a misunderstanding that it was going to be lifted tomorrow, March 1st. And as a result, that's where that came into the memo. So it's, I don't know if I'm reading this from an email from the city attorney, and so the stay could be lifted later. So there is a little bit of time, and then back to the point of, we don't know how fast people will be evicted once that stay is lifted. But I just want to clarify the March 1st. And I don't know, Kira, if you can.
Sure, Madam Chair, yes. I believe City Attorney McSherry had done the research and sent that information over the weekend. I believe it was Sunday or Monday, early today, that we got the information that there is not necessarily, March 1st is not necessarily the hard deadline, that the courts had sort of intentionally left it a little ambiguous. So what getting the funding into the budget would, in short order, would allow us to go to procurement and have the funds available by the time that evictions may increase due to the moratorium becoming lifted is the way I see it.
Right. So just wanted to clarify.
Yes, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. At the time that I wrote the memo,
Yeah.
my full understanding was that the deadline, and everyone's understanding, frankly, was the deadline was March 1st. So that can be adjusted as well for quality of life. And I'm very happy to put in more detail into the memo for quality of life as well.
Right. And I guess, you know, again, I've missed some of the conversation that's gone on. Kira, I'll have to go back and watch the video for a lot of what you said. I'm very sorry to have missed that. I do think that it's really important that we, and we did in quality of life when I was chair last year, we did hear some of the eviction reports that Chainbreaker has put out. And I think it has given us a lot of information, but there's been a lot that's been happening since that last report. And I think understanding kind of the landscape that we're in would be very important for the council at some point to either in a memo or in a presentation and to understand, you know, the different actors, the different people. There are lots of people working on this problem. This problem is an enormous problem. And we want to do what we can to help people who are in crisis. And I totally understand that this has come up very, very quickly. But again, I do think we need more context so that we do, so that we can make these decisions and know that we're making them responsibly and understanding that our role is appropriate and, you know, that it fits with all the other things that are going on to combat what is a pending crisis and very, very serious problem that we're all very concerned about. And I think, you know, we do want to do what we can to help people. So I don't know. With that, I guess I'll go back to the committee. I don't know where we are, if everybody's had a chance to speak to this. I don't think we have a motion on the floor. I don't know what the committee would like to do. Maybe we'll take it from there.
Madam Chair, I'll move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second for approval of this item. Is there further discussion? If not, can we take the roll?
Counselor Villarreal.
Yes.
Counselor Cassett.
Yes.
Counselor Lindell.
Yes.
Counselor Rivera.
Yes.
And Counselor Romero Worth.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. That item does pass. Thank you all. Thank you, Kira, for joining us. Go enjoy your night. I'm so sorry.
Madam Chair, may I just say
Yes.
that I deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak to it, and I deeply appreciate the work of the Finance Committee tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. All right. I'm sorry, did somebody wave at me? Director McCoy, let's see, let's go back. Let's see if any of my devices work now.
The next item on the agenda, Madam Chair, would be matters from staff, and there are no matters from staff this evening.
Thank you. Matters from the committee. Matters from the chair. Our next meeting Monday, March 21st. And thank you all tonight for your work on all these budget adjustment requests. Really appreciate it. And thank you, staff. Appreciate it. We're adjourned.